I'm a little bit scared for this series. I'm not going to lie, but I'm still going to come in hot. Okay. All right. Focus. For a while now, I've been wanting to do a series on masculinity. It's something that I've reflected on quite a bit, both in myself and in my relationships with other men. But it wasn't really until I started doing work on myself, until I started going to therapy for an extended period, that I think I gained some awareness of men or a lack thereof today. Instead, what I've been seeing a lot of is lots and lots of bitches masquerading as men. It's not a novel idea, and probably nothing I say will be unique in any way. So I guess this is just another voice joining a chorus, hopefully a growing chorus. And for me, I wanted to start by identifying what I think really makes a man, and not say a bitch. Okay. I personally find all this talk about specific behavior of men, like the affinity for UFC and football, or all the catcalling, or the not sharing feelings, like talking about men's behavior, I think in the general public has not really gotten much at the heart of what I think might be going on with men. It's not really much of a nuanced discussion, nor do I find the more abstract, intellectualized discussions of masculinity that you find more in academia to quite hit home for any of the regular everyday people. I'll keep it simple. I think that for some reason, we, including myself here, collectively as men, are having a hard time identifying who to look up to because we're confused. We haven't drawn clear lines about who the men are and who the bitches are. There are people today looking up to people like Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Joe Rogan, and think, yeah, that's a real man, not realizing that they're all just bitches in different form. And if you look up to these bitches, then guess what? You'll become a bitch. So in this series, it's going to be my feeble attempt at setting the record straight on who I think, anyways, that the real men are and who the bitches are. And to provide at least what I use as some surefire ways to differentiate between them. Because once you expose these bitches as the bitches that they are, then the attraction to being anything like them or imitate them or try to, attain the kind of lifestyle that they have should, I think, dissipate. And maybe that'll be the start of people looking for better role models. And maybe even, hopefully, the start of people trying to be better role models because they're trying to avoid being like these bitches. Let me be clear about a few things before I get deeper into this topic. It'll be important for me to set some foundations of what I'm attempting to do, because if you start projecting things onto me, this discussion's going to go way off the rails quickly before it even gets started. So I want to be very explicit on a few points, just so that we're all on the same page. First off, everything I express in this series is just my personal views. Okay? You don't have to agree with me. It's fine. I'm not looking for your agreement or your approval. My views are my own. However, I don't find it helpful if you just tell me that you disagree. What matters to me is that we talk about why we disagree. Look to reasons, evidence, right? Examples to back up our views. And I want both of us, anyways, to be open to changing our views in light of those discussions in that exchange, right? I'm not coming in as an expert. I'm not coming here to tell you what's correct or true. I'm just telling you what I think. But you might have different opinions. And if so, I want to hear why that is. And I genuinely do want to hear, because I'm one of those people who are constantly changing my views in light of these types of discussions. So I'm always open to changing my mind. There'll be spots along the series you'll see where I'll admit, like, I don't know very much about it, and I'm sure some of you probably have greater expertise in certain areas. Share it. Like, don't stay silent. Talk about it, at least with people that are open to hearing what you have to say, and I'll be one of those people, right? If you yourself are not open to being wrong, to learning, to changing, to challenging yourself and others, then you're a bitch. Okay? All right. 2, I am not here to shame or attack men or manhood or masculinity. Okay. That is not my aim at all. If anything, I want to have an honest discussion about what manhood is because I think there's some benefit to actually having an open conversation about it. But that also means that we're going to have to be honest. And, that means that sometimes we're going to point out things that maybe not, or maybe isn't such a positive thing about being a man. But ultimately, I want the world to just have better men. And I truly believe that there are good men out there who want the same thing. They want good men to have their moment in the sun, right? To be the ones that are proper role models for the youth, who give to their community and make the world a better place. But here's the thing, being a man means owning up to your shit and being able to handle others pointing out some realities that aren't easy to hear. So I'm not going to lie, you might feel shame or feel attacked. And if so, I hope that you can take a moment to acknowledge your feelings. I will acknowledge them if we ever get a chance to meet, right? That you feel the way that you do. And to work with you, to talk with you, to find out where it's coming from. I'll share myself, right? I've had many experiences of feeling attacked, sometimes by women, sometimes by other men, only to realize that I just felt that way because something I heard honestly rang true. And it was something that I didn't like about myself. So it was like hitting certain insecurities that I have. And then so I was reacting by I was feeling this way for a reason, right? I'll acknowledge your feelings. In other words, I'll acknowledge that you feel that you feel the way that you feel, and that you are allowed to feel that the way that you feel. I'm not going to stop you from feeling how you feel. But I also want to be clear that that is not the same as acknowledging that what you make of that feeling, like placing blame or claiming that there's some injustice has been done to you, or that some moral judgment is, being placed upon you or something like that. Like that doesn't necessarily follow from the fact that you feel the way that you do. Your feelings are your feelings, right? So please realize that your feelings are your feelings, and your feelings are not the same as reality. I've learned that in my own life. I have to, had to grow into differentiating between it, but your feelings are not the same as reality. Okay. If you can't see that distinction, guess what? Then you're a bitch. All right? Okay. 3. I am focusing on men because there's clearly, undeniably, an epidemic among men. I actually think it's probably more men of particular, right, economic situations and depending on the kind of community that they're in. There's a lot of other factors, not just men across the board necessarily, but generally among men, we have some major, collectively, some issues that are haunting men, right? I think this is backed up well by the studies, at least the ones that I'm aware of, regarding male loneliness, depression, suicide rate, that shows us that men on the whole are suffering. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, it's there. To be clear, this isn't necessarily true of all men. However, the data and my own experience, at least the people in my community, when I see, the difference between how girls are doing at school, how the boys are doing at school, how they're doing in terms of social, acceptance and so on, right? Like clearly there's something off here, right? And it's affecting men specifically, right? And it's a gender gap. I'm not going to deny it. There's a gender gap. And that's leading to men experiencing this sort of harm and suffering. So collectively, men are not doing so well, even if there might be exceptions. And if there is an issue facing men, then anyone who is not a man will have zero reason to care. I'm sorry, but no one's coming to save you, man. Like, except people who might care, which might probably be other men, if they see and they're able to go ahead and empathize with your suffering, right? The only ones that can save men are men, right? I can't stress this enough. We need to do this for each other, and we won't get started on giving each other the right kind of support and helping each other grow if we don't acknowledge that we, men as a group, have a serious problem on our hands. And it's a problem that no one else is going to take care of other than men, okay? And I want to, again, I'm stressing this a lot because I think people often take some of the things I say quite personally. And I'm like, This is not personal. This is not directed at you, right? So I repeat, this is not about any one individual man. This is about the male community as a whole. And if you can't differentiate between the tendency within a collective group versus some small subset of individuals within that larger group, then you're a bitch. All right. Finally, number 4. If you were offended at my suggestion that you might be a bitch, then you're a bitch. Okay? Look, there's a little bit of bitch in all of us. There's no shame in it. Like I said, I'm not here to shame you, right? I have a little bit of bitch in me. I don't like it when others point it out, or maybe point it out to somebody else and I see the parallels. But I also try to acknowledge it to be true when it is true, because to be honest, denial is not going to help me be any less of a bitch. Only hardcore bitches are too insecure to acknowledge that they're being a little bit of a bitch, right? So stop being a bitch and just accept the reality that you aren't perfect, just like I'm not, just like no one else in the world is. I will be wrong sometimes. You'll be wrong sometimes. I'll make mistakes sometimes. You make mistakes sometimes. That's just reality of deal with it, okay? Not dealing with it is what will make you more of a bitch. So stop being a bitch. Now, now that I got all of that out of the way, let's return to the central question. What makes a man and not, say, a boy? That's the core of what I want to get into in this series, right? I want to focus on what it means to grow into a man. A boy is a boy, a man is a man. A man that is still mentally and emotionally a boy, that's a bitch. But how do we make sure that boys grow into men and not into bitches? Well, we're going to have to begin with the basics of properly defining what it means to be a man. And I think too many people get confused with images of men versus the heart of what it actually means to be a man. Okay. Then we could go on to discuss how to nurture boys into becoming men. But first, we need to get our facts straight and figure out what a real man is. All right. Why do we need to have this discussion at all? Don't we all know what it means to be a man? Oh, hell no. Okay, it's clear that many boys don't know what it means to be a man and aren't aiming to be men because of the role models they have in their lives. Many boys seem to hold up bitches to be the exemplar of a man. Let me give you a classic prime example. Drake's bitch ass, all right? If you don't know Aubrey Drake Graham, that bitch ass motherfucker, this bitch got all these kids confused about what a real man is, and we need to fix it. So I'm going to say my piece on the issue. I honestly don't want the talk to end there. Again, my hope is that every man gets off their ass and speaks loud and clear on calling out bitches and bitch assness in the world, so that collectively we can create a culture against bitch assetry, if that's even a word. I believe there are good men in the world that have a clear eye and, good way of differentiating between men and bitches. I just want them to be more vocal leaders in their community. But you and I might differ on what we view as good men. So I need for us to see eye to eye on this issue before you go off and become another one of these bitches with a microphone, rather than a real man that raises up the next generation of real men. Okay? I want to be clear about something, though. We are discussing in part how to nurture boys to become men. But I am honestly primarily in this series, I'm primarily talking to adults. That's my target audience. At least that's my aim. And I'm pleading with y'all to get your shit together. Here's the thing. I work primarily with students in the high school to college range, right? So mostly in the 15 to 23-year-old range. I am not directing my attention at them because the truth is that, they will only become what the previous generations guide them to become. They're still figuring things out for themselves, trying to figure out who they are, trying to figure out what their purpose in life is, right? I mean, just think back for yourself if you're, past these ages, right? Like where you were mentally at these ages, like you didn't have a good sense of the rest of the world. You were still kind of living in a little bit of a bubble. You were still, not unsure of yourself. You're trying to still figure things out for yourself, right? It doesn't make sense for us to put the responsibility at least completely, on them to know what it means to be a man when they're still trying to figure that out. No, I'm talking to grown ass men or supposed men. I'm talking to the 38-year-old father. I'm talking to the 50-year-old store manager or a leader in their community. I'm talking to those who are in a position to make a real difference. The one thing I hate is when older generations whine and bitch about the younger generation, talking about how kids were back in my days, right? That, oh yeah, if they just grew up in my generation, right, we wouldn't do this and that, and this is so appalling. Like, how dare they spend so much time worrying about getting their avocado toast and yada yada. Okay, look, it's the older generations that gave birth to and raised the younger generation. If you want to see what went wrong in the younger generations, you can't look at the youth. You need to look in the fucking mirror. You need to look at the adults in the room that gave rise to that generation. You, all you 30-plus-year-olds, need to take a hard look at yourself and acknowledge your part in how the younger generation is turning out. Take some ownership of your part in this and find a way to do better, right? It's your responsibility. It's yours. It's mine. It's all of us, right? It's all these adults that should be taking responsibility for how the children in our community turn out. And when the children turn out to be bitches, look in the mirror, look inward, because you were the generation that raised these bitches. Bitches are not born out of a tree. They are nurtured and raised into being bitches. So I am imploring all of you adults to get your shit together, stop complaining, and get off your ass to do something about it. It doesn't have to be anything fanciful. In fact, the best way to make a positive impact is just not to be a bitch yourself. Children learn from what we do, not from what we say. The way you move will say a lot about what our youth pick up about what it means to be a man. So start with yourself, then your home, then your community, right? It can be as simple as becoming a part of, a chorus of men who mentor children, especially those without fathers, or push for school or social policies that better nurture future men. The reality is that boys don't become men by watching people on the internet. They become men when there is a real man that actually enters into their real life face to face and invests their time and energy in walking through life with them, guiding them, giving them resources and direction, helping them find their purpose, right? Boys respond to men who develop a real relationship with them. You need to be outside, and you need to be outside doing something, engaging with these boys, no matter how big or small. Little things done with great intention can make a real impact, especially if each of us are doing our part so that collectively a lot of this work is getting done. But doing nothing is not an option. If you are not part of the solution, you're a complicit bitch hindering progress, and I have no respect for you. Just as I would want you to call me out for being a complicit bitch, I hope you can see this is not a desire to shame you, but to acknowledge that you are actually capable of more. I'd like to stand by your side in this fight together to help young boys. But if you're not fighting with me, I cannot wait for you to decide whether or not you're going to participate. There's just too much at stake to just sit on the sideline. Sorry, I told you I was going to come in hot. All right. Now, I need to address the title because I imagine it might seem a bit intense or maybe a little clickbaity. I don't know. So I don't want any confusion about what I'm doing, why I'm using the words I'm using, and why I'm being so damn blunt and in your face, so much cursing. The term bitch here can be used in a pejorative, gendered way. That's not how I'm using it, as you can see. I'm using it as a way to describe basically people who are cowards, people who are mentally, cognitively still children that haven't matured, right? So immature might be a synonym for it, the way that I'm using it. But, is there a better word for it that's not so, blunt and explicit? Yes. Will it be as effective as getting the message across? Hell no. I don't think it will, anyways. If you're caught up in the language that I use, then turn to a different podcast or listen to something else, okay? I'm not going to say it any other way because this is the way that at least people in circles that I run with, and I know that, there's a lot of circles that are kind of like this. The people at least that I'm wanting to reach, this is how we speak. Okay. I'm personally not worried and worked up over the specific words used to express the idea or thought. I do believe that there's power in words, but I also believe that what's important to communicate is the idea, not the word. And this idea I'm wanting to communicate is honestly captured best by the, in common vernacular, by the word bitch. The words coward, childish, immature, or anything of the like, it doesn't really capture the feeling that I'm going for. The utter disgust I feel at seeing the kind of bitch assetry I see. Now, you can disagree with me, and if you do and want to have an actual productive conversation about it, I'm not hiding. You can find me, contact me, and I'll make time for you as much as, I have time for it. But just don't be a bitch about it and hide yourself behind anonymous comments. I don't respect that shit. Okay. All right. One last note. One last note. Though I am addressing manhood because there's a genuine issue with masculinity, at least in the United States, but I'm fairly certain this is kind of more worldwide. That doesn't mean that what I'm about to say about manhood only applies to men. In fact, my more abstract philosophical belief here is that the points I'm making in this series are more generally about humans growing into virtuous people, into better people. I'm heavily influenced here by Aristotle, but also a lot of the 17th and 18th century, Enlightenment thinkers. And I think the central question is more about how you can grow into the best version of yourself. And that applies to men, women, non-binary, whatever else category you want to put in here. I honestly don't give a shit. Now, again, I think as a group, there are issues with masculinity that doesn't seem as prevalent as with other genders, at least the way that we as society kind of divide up these genders. But the truth is that there's a little bitch in every person. And we all need to work on addressing that bitch inside us. All this is to say, a bitch is a bitch. So don't get it twisted. No one is off the hook. If you're a bitch, I'm coming for you.